fashion, but in April something happened that showed us the true cost. Hundreds of people killed making clothes for Western high streets. When Rana Plaza collapsed, an industry promised to change. We go undercover to find factories working incredible shifts. The workers whose bosses lie about hours, leaving them unprotected.
Their only purpose is to produce product. They might as well be machines.
And dangerous factories where workers are locked inside.
I think the guard has just locked the gate.
And a UK company not paying compensation after a fire where more than 100 people died. This place was built for us. It supplied our high streets with cheap clothes. And these are some of the people who made them.
কাছে মোবাইল ছিল, মোবাইলে আমার ফ্যামিলির সঙ্গে কথা বলি যে আমার মাপসুক করে দেন, আমি মরে যাইতে পারি।
পুরোটা পায়ের উপরে লাশ, এই পায়ে লাশ, এই হাতে লাশ, এই পায়ের উপরে ভীম চাপানো।
At 9 a.m. on the 24th of April, the world woke up to the cost of cheap clothes. The 8th-floor Rana Plaza building in Bangladesh's capital, Dhaka, collapsed.
1,100 people died here. 2,500 were injured. But actually, when you see the size of the place, that's when you get a real sense of the horror of what happened here.
Primark, Matalan and Bon Marché had clothes made here. So far, only Primark has paid compensation. Matalan and Bon Marché are in talks.
Actually, it's been a wake-up call to the whole industry that we can't go on like this. We can't have another building collapse. We can't have an industrial accident on this scale again.
The first thing you need to know is many workers face dangerous conditions and fire is the greatest threat. Panorama has discovered there have been at least 50 fires in the last 10 months. This is another place where workers died. Tazreen Fashion made clothes for Walmart and C&A. In November, more than 100 people were killed here when fire swept through the building.
Many workers jumped through the window, through exhaust fan. See, there is a broken exhaust fan and they jumped.
That's too high, isn't it?
The facts are horrifying. Some supervisors locked gates inside the burning building with workers still inside. It's thought it was to stop them stealing.
It went black. Women workers, because their long hairs were catching on fire, so they're helping each other to cut their hairs off. At the very last minute, they took their clothes off to get rid of the fire.
Outside, all the families could do was watch. This man lost his wife and his sister-in-law. His wife's body was never found.
আমার ওয়াইফটারে প্রচন্ড ভালোবাসতাম। আমি মানে বলতে পারি আমি যেদিনকে আগুন ধরে ওই দিনকে লাঞ্চ হো তার সাথে আমি কথা বলে গেছি, তার সাথে অনেকটা কথা হয়েছে লাঞ্চে। কিন্তু কয়েক ঘন্টার মধ্যে আয়সা দিকে যে সে নাই, অথচ নিজের চোখে দেখতেছি আগুনটা দাও দাও বেরো দেখতেছি, কিন্তু বাঁচার মতন কোনো পদক্ষেপ নেই।
It wasn't even a surprise. The factory was operating without a fire safety certificate. Walmart say they didn't know their clothes were being made here. We've been told about clothes being made for a British retailer. Edinburgh Woolen Mill has nearly 400 stores in the UK. This is their latest advert, glossy and on the streets of Edinburgh. They say the clothes are exclusively designed in Scotland, but they're not made there. These photos show Edinburgh Woolen Mill clothing in the factory just after the fire. The company has not paid compensation. It says rejected clothes were stored at Tazreen without its knowledge after being made elsewhere and were scattered around to implicate them.
We've been in contact with Edinburgh Woolen Mill since the day after the Tazreen fire, and I think it's a real shame, actually, that they are refusing to take responsibility for those workers.
This is a country being transformed by the clothing industry. Bangladesh is the world's second biggest exporter of clothes, from budget fashions to exclusive brands. And much of the industry is safe and modern.
Everything in this country is built around this business. Absolutely the lifeline of this country. Absolutely the lifeline of the economy. Absolutely the lifeline of the women folk.
Amatan Chowdhury makes clothes for Marks and Spencer and Tesco. His factory also had a fire, though no one was injured. He's happy with his present buyers, but says some put price before safety.
They care about delivery and price first, then quality. And safety comes very low in their priority.
So safety is still last.
For the buyer, yes, of course.
This was a factory without permission or safety checks. 8 months ago, it also had a fire.
মনে করেন আগুন দাও দাও করে জ্বলে উঠছে, আগুন দাও দাও করে জ্বলে উঠছে, সবাই মনে করেন দৌড় মারছে, পিছনে তাকাইতে আগুন পরে যার যার জীবন বাঁচে, মনে করেন আমরা দৌড়ে পড়ছি।
The company here was a subcontractor, taking in work from other factories.
ভেতরে তো মনে করেন এই যারা যা আছে মোচর সুদা মনে করেন পুরা কালো হয়ে গেছে, ধুয়ে কিছু দেখা গেছিল না।
8 people died in the scramble to get away from the fire.
It's just as if the fire went out 2 days ago. Still even smells in here.
Workers were paid about £1 a day to make clothes for brands like Lotto Sportswear and Bershka, which is part of the same group as Zara. The factory had no safety equipment and just 2 exits. When fire broke out, one of them had been closed.
The main body of workers are in here. All these offcuts, all these clothes that were stood on, they all start to go up in flames and people run for their lives. And there are 2 main exits. There's one there and then there's a door just here. You choose this one and it can get very grim.
This man was the caretaker. He closed the gate. Do you feel responsible for their deaths? He claims he was told to pull the gate across when he went on his break to stop workers stealing. Lotto told us they stopped using the factory 3 months before the fire, and Bershka said it didn't know its clothes were being made in the factory. But shouldn't Western retailers know how their clothes are being produced? This is Tonghai Sweaters. It produces jumpers mostly for Primark. The factory is modern and workers can earn a decent local wage, about £4 a day. 8 people were killed here in a fire in May. It was after the factory was closed, and Primark says it was because of arson.
We've uncovered something else about this factory. It's about how places like this actually go about producing very cheap clothing.
It's 7 p.m. and we're waiting outside Tonghai. These 2 sewing operators have just got off work. They're prepared to reveal how factories break the rules on working hours.
এটা আমাদের হাজিরাঘাট, এখানে লেখা আছে আমরা 8টায় ঢুকি, 5টায় বের হই, কিন্তু আসলে আমরা বের হই 7টায়।
Primark, like most retailers, has a code of conduct. It limits working hours. But our insiders say factory managers keep 2 sets of books, one for the retailer, the other with the extra hours. They've sometimes worked until 10 p.m, but their timesheets always say 5. The factory categorically denied keeping false records and said extra hours were recorded separately. Some workers chose to work late to achieve their target production. Primark said it didn't know there were 2 sets of books and admits some workers were working longer than its code of conduct stipulates. It will be taking steps to ensure this is properly implemented. But across the industry, we've been told hiding hours in this way is widespread.
The factory owners, they keep like 2 different books. So one they show to the buyers, another they show to the workers. These retailers' so-called audits really doesn't work.
And the more we looked, the more we could see why the factories were hiding the truth about working hours. This is a rush hour at 10 o'clock at night. Workers who'd been inside factories since early morning finally going home. One worker told us he'd just done a 13-hour day in Charmin Group, a company making trousers for retailers like H&M and Gap.
ঘুমাইতে 12টা ঘুমাবো, 4-5 ঘন্টা ঘুমানোর পর আবার ভোর সেই 5টায় উঠতে হবে। মন তো চায় না ভাই, আসলে একটা অমানসিক ব্যাপার। আমরা বন্দি, আসতে হবে।
Today he earned around £2.50. He claims he's worked 27 out of the last 28 days.
If you know that if you don't work long hours, you're not going to be able to feed your family, then really it's not a choice either, because you're obliged to do those hours just to pay the rent and put food on the table.
So our insider's factory makes clothes for H&M. They're the biggest buyer from Bangladesh and big on the high street thanks to ads like this racing one starring David Beckham. H&M also has rules on working hours, 48 hours a week plus no more than 12 hours overtime. But does that happen? We've come back to ask our insider.
We'll just move down the road.
He says the codes of conduct are worthless. He's had to do up to 100 hours of overtime a month, but it doesn't all show up on his payslip.
এই পেস্লিপে মাত্র 50 ঘন্টা বা 52 ঘন্টা 54 ঘন্টা আর বাদ বাকি যে ওভারটাইম থাকে এটা এক্সট্রা শিটে দেওয়া থাকে, এটা সবসময় গোপন থাকে, এটা কোনো সময় দেখানো হয় না, এটা সম্পূর্ণ একটা ধোঁকাবাজি।
The factory admits it keeps 2 sets of books, but says it's to identify overtime payments. But why don't retailers know the truth about hours? Well, even a group part funded by the industry admits there's an issue.
Working hours in Bangladesh is a real problem. Now again, there are places where this is being tackled and good practice, but we know that it's not only a widespread problem, it's a problem that auditors are struggling to pick up.
So what do factories tell Western buyers? Well, we pretended to be from a fake British clothing company and headed to Sharmin. The factory is clean and modern. As we're shown around, we soon see those major Western brands.
Yes.
5% of the clothes are for Gap, and these jeans are for discount supermarket Lidl.
More like us, I think.
These H&M trousers are being sent to the UK, part of an order of almost 1.5 million pairs. But all the way round, we're told how important it is to stick to the rules.
What hours then do your workers working? What hours do they work? Normally work 8 hours is normal working, plus 2 hours is overtime.
So every day they'll do 8 hours of...
And 2 hours overtime. Do they do any overtime? No. Maybe only if required, but that is really rare.
We're told workers start at 7 a.m. and the factory will close at 5:30. Sounds like they stick to the rules. The next day, we're up early to see for ourselves.
So it's 6:45 in the morning and we've come to see workers go in to start their shift, and we'll be here at the end when they come out, so we can see for ourselves how long the working day is.
We wait as day turns to night. The workers leave for their evening meal. But as we watch, many of them come back. It's gone 10 and the lights are still on.
Here they come, here they come, here they come. There are workers just piling out of the factory. We know they started work at 7 o'clock this morning, even allowing for half an hour for lunch. They should have left at 3:30 this afternoon or 5:30 if they did 2 hours overtime. It is now 10:30 at night and they're streaming out.
We checked on other days. We saw some workers starting before 7 a.m. and finishing at 10:30 at night. The factory told us it was compliant with the law and workers were never forced to do overtime. A small minority of workers were doing long hours in order to extend their holidays. But it's clear the factory is ignoring Western retailers' codes of conduct.
How important are codes of conduct? How they're applied is key. You can either take that as, if you like, a PR vehicle, or you can take that seriously. Now, we know many companies that take this very seriously, share with us their findings of problems, and then put in place remediation and change.
H&M says it's working to reduce hours, but overtime remains a major challenge in the garment industry. It monitors overtime at Sharmin by checking documentation and through worker interviews. Gap told us all its suppliers are required to comply with its code of conduct, and it had no plans to place further orders at Charmaine. We were shocked by the shifts we saw, but we heard dark stories of factories that pushed their workers further.
So we're heading into Dakar city centre now because we've been told that another shift at another factory is working even later. It's gone midnight and the people in this factory have been in there since 7 a.m, but we're told they are still working.
It's called Hameen Sportswear. It's also owned by the Charmaine Group, and we've heard they're working for a big Western supermarket. We park up in the shadows and watch. Around 70 workers are still hard at work. Midnight becomes 1, and still they work. The local fire station told us there was a fire here a month earlier. But when the guard wants to stretch his legs, he does this.
I think the guard has just locked the gate.
He locks the workers inside. After all the factory fires where people were trapped by locked gates, it's still happening.
So the guard has locked the main gate and is doing kind of odd exercises in front of the factory. And we're on a shift which is locked inside. We can see the machines and they're still working hard.
Over the next hour, the guard comes and goes, leaving the workers inside. At 2:30, 19 and a half hours after they started, their shift finally ends. But the gate is still locked.
Right, here we go, so they're being let out, literally unlocked and released.
When they're opened, the exhausted workers pour out.
There you go. They're all back at 7 tomorrow morning.
One man agreed to talk to us anonymously. He's paid just over £2 for his 19-hour day, and he has to be back at work in 4 hours.
অনুভূতিটা খারাপ লাগে এবং শরীর স্বাস্থ্য ঠিক মতো গত 2 সপ্তাহ মনে করেন যে এই মাসের মধ্যে 8টা হয়েছে কিছুদিন মনে করেন এক সপ্তাহের মধ্যে 6টা 5টা নাইট হয়েছে এক সপ্তাহ
We stake out the factory on another night. This time workers start at 8 a.m. and leave at 3 a.m. Another 19-hour day.
Behind of this level, they are the human faces. And this human should be treated as a human, not like an equipment, not like a slave.
We want to test whether the factory tells Western buyers about these hours. So it's our turn to go through those gates. The compliance manager confirms that they're making clothes for one of Europe's biggest supermarkets.
Not making which buyer? Lidl. They're making for Lidl.
Lidl has 600 stores in the UK. This is a big European order, 150,000 pairs of children's jeans and dungarees. This is an older factory, much more cramped.
She's in here.
We found this woman. She was working under a table. And the biggest worry of all in such cramped conditions, the gate we saw being locked. So they say the gates are never locked. What about working hours?
What time of day do these people finish work? 5:30. 5:30 across the whole. Yeah.
And just to check, we asked for timesheets. They gave us the timesheet for the night we sat outside and for the section that worked until the early hours.
On Saturday night, on Saturday the 20th, they started work at 7 in the morning and they finished at 5:30. So on Saturday night they finished at 5:30.
A straight lie. We saw workers leaving at 2:30 a.m, a full 9 hours after the official records suggested.
That's sort of unbelievable. 2 nights ago I sat outside the factory and watched workers stagger out 19 hours after the shift started. Now the manager's shown me a timesheet which says that never happened. There's one timesheet for us, Western buyers, and then there's the other miserable timesheet that the workers are forced to stick to.
On timesheets, the factory owners say our allegations are false and baseless. All overtime is voluntary, the factory works legally and does not deprive workers of their rights. On the 19-hour shift, they said there was no such incident. They deny there was a fire and say there was a second gate that was open. Lidl told us what we found at both factories was concerning. They say they've spent more than £6 million to improve the living and working conditions in Bangladesh. Retailers accept things need to change after Rana Plaza. And dozens have promised to work together to make their factories safer. They say each one will be inspected.
If you look at it from the sense of who's got responsibility to fix it, it's got to be Bangladesh government, Bangladesh industry, and it's got to be the retail sector and the international brands.
But have all companies moved on? Edinburgh Woolen Mill is still denying its clothes were made at Tazreen, the factory where more than 100 workers died in a fire. And it's still not paying compensation. So we dug deeper. We were handed these documents. They include specific product codes and appear to show Edinburgh Woolen Mill t-shirts and polo shirts were made and inspected inside the Tazreen factory. Again, they said we were wrong. Our information was inaccurate or fabricated. The Tazreen group never made polo shirts for them. So what is this then? Here is a picture of an Edinburgh Woolen Mill polo shirt taken inside that burnt out factory. And here is the same style of polo shirt that we bought just here at this shop. And if you look inside, they have the same codes as are contained in those documents. So we have documents, codes, pictures, and now the garment. We even spoke to Tazreen workers who say they produced Edinburgh Woolen Mill products for months. But the company strongly objected to those claims and reiterated that the clothes and paperwork were stored in the factory without its knowledge. Back in Bangladesh, the majority of factories are safe, but it's estimated up to 1 million people work in dangerous or illegal conditions.
They're risking their lives, so some people on the other side of the world, the other side of the ocean, could wear nice clothes. You have to do what you have to do. I mean, figure out a creative way to find cheap clothing which is not killing people.
Retailers say they want change, but it feels like it's money that's still calling the shots in the factories of Bangladesh. Next week, Panorama follows British doctors as they try to save the lives of children caught up in Syria's brutal civil war.
It's absolute chaos. I've never seen anything like it, ever.
If you needed a lift to France, would you ask the police? Or on a day's work for the motorway cops next? On BBC Two, Midwives in the Making, Students Learning Fast and the Heart of Maternity. Or on 3, John Bishop and Greg Davis feature